I've got a question about when you were mentioning sentient beings yesterday. You went through a list, and some of them on the list seem quite surprising. Like you seem to include what do you include in
butterflies?
Huh?
Butterflies.
Yeah, I think clouds were in there, weren't they? Or was that just me? It seemed like we went through a list of things that I wouldn't necessarily associate immediately with being sentient.
I see. I don't remember what I said.
Pretty much everything you can imagine, I think. Everything imaginable seemed to be.
But what I meant was that we have the recording, so we can go back and check if this goes to court or something. We have some evidence. But what I meant was that, what I was referring to was the aliveness of nature. Not that water would be a sentient being or wind would be a sentient being, but just the aliveness of it. That's what I meant.
I think you mentioned sentient beings and then you expanded it from sentient beings, so it wasn't like a list of...
It just got out of hand. Kind of slipped. Am I praying for water here to be liberated? Am I praying for the wind to be liberated? I didn't know that wind was particularly confused about its existence, but apparently it is, because it says so.
So James, next time when it rains on you, it's personal. Because the rain has something. It's a person. Yeah, Kim.
Yes.
Where are you? Oh yeah. Yeah. No. Yesterday, the what you said about having compassion, and I liked what you said about I suppose the nature of compassion, like that you don't sort of go into the shit like with the person who's suffering yourself. Like, you don't need to do that, or that's not how it works. You retain your own clarity and well-being, but you acknowledge the other person's suffering without going into the pit, you know, with them. Yeah, like I thought that was really good. Yeah, so I suppose I've heard stuff like that before, but it definitely kind of chimed. It made sense. Yeah. So and that's like you were talking about bodhicitta. So that's the sort of dynamic. That's how that works. When we come across other people who are suffering, we make an effort to reach out to acknowledge their pain, their suffering, without going down in there ourselves. Is that right? Is that the sort of message of
Yeah.
body? Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah. That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I liked it. It was good. You know, it reminded me of, I suppose it's healthy, you know, to maintain our, you know, our own independence. Yeah, I suppose sense of well-being and maybe in the past I've had tendencies to sort of, I don't know, disguise myself or to lose myself and to sort of, you know, be affected, be influenced by other people's suffering and fall into, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe I'll just try to say something, a few more words about that. So all beings, according to Buddhism, you know, all beings have Buddha nature, but are caught in samsara, going around and round in their minds. So all beings want to be free and want to be happy. Happiness is a tricky word because, and it gets tossed around in Buddhism nowadays a lot, but happiness is a bit tricky because, you know, well, as long as if we are talking about happiness, it needs to be selfless happiness, then it's fine. But if it's self-based happiness, you know, hedonism, that's a different thing. But so the basic theory of Buddhism says that all beings have Buddha nature, yet are in samsaric condition, hence confused, but they want out of it. So if we look at that basic idea, and then we have the precious opportunity to know ourselves as individuals, each one of us. So our clarity and experiential knowledge of our natural state increases as we practice. And according to the Buddhist theory, that's what everybody else really wants. That's the only thing that satisfies people and beings, knowing ourselves, rather than being confused about our identity, our being, and then seeking happiness from things that are external to us. So if we think of compassion then, that we know that all beings want to be selflessly happy, want to be satisfied in that sense, you know, through removing their self-delusion, you know, that's kind of easy to transmit. If you have clarity yourself, that's easy to transmit for others. It's easy to show others, you know, what they want. Of course, in practice, you know, usually if we are talking about our daily practice at home, then we're just, you know, home practicing alone. There's usually aren't people watching us or seeing us practice. So that's all energetic, all these prayers and such. But But then if we meet people and discuss with people, talk with people, get to know new people, it's very easy to transmit, to actually demonstrate for them what the solution is. And that is compassion. Showing it through our body, expressing it through discussion. That's compassion. You know, showing them, demonstrating for them what they really need. That's of course another thing if they make the connection, or if they rather get the new BMW. But you know, that's a different matter. Then they just don't have, you know, if people seek happiness, fulfillment from external things, then it's just a matter of merit, which a better word for it, merit is kind of a classical Buddhist word, but what it means readiness. Readiness to hear about this solution that Dharma provides, and readiness to do something about our deluded condition. If you have merit, when you hear the Dharma, when you hear that all beings have Buddha nature, and which means every one of us, you know, it clicks. And then you start practice, whatever kind of practice it is, to increase your self-knowledge. But I think that bodhicitta is really simple. Like there is this fool's compassion, which means that, you know, you become kind of a softy in a stupid way, you know. You know, what's the word, like
Naive.
Or become compassionate in a naive way.
Or faux in French, this faux, you know, sort of false, or yeah, same, yeah.
Yeah. But that's also a good experience to experience that fool's compassion, because it shows you that it doesn't work. That's not it. That's not the bodhicitta what Buddhism talks about.
Yeah, no, I find that, yeah, no, that's interesting, because it's a different way of thinking about compassion for me. And because, you know, even when I hear the word bodhicitta, I get images of running around trying to save, you know, deluded, suffering people, and, you know, intervening or something, and being this do-gooder. But when you describe it like that, it's just like, if you, by letting your own light shine, that is transmitting the power, you know, that is compassion as well, or you know, more so maybe. So yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. And just, you know, with the political climate in the world at the moment, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on with inequality and racism, and you see different people reacting in different ways in different groups. And, you know, it's a very live issue. You see white people bending down on their knees in front of black people in America. And it's one thing to march in solidarity, but these other gestures that are happening, you know, to try and, you know, express some kind of, I suppose they're trying to express a form of compassion in a way, but, you know, a lot of it might be, you know, misguided, or that fool's type of compassion. But it's an interesting topic, yeah, you know, for especially at the moment, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of when we talk about the current situation in the world and politics and racial issues, you know, that's something that I can't really, and I don't want to discuss, because I'm not a specialist, and it's like you know, I get into trouble if I try to talk about that. But from the point, from the point of view of Dharma, it's really, really simple actually. This compassion, what it means, Yeah, very simple. But also, like when you said that running around trying to save people, you said something like that. There's the crucial element of merit. Merit is punya in Sanskrit. Punya, punya. So widely discussed in Buddhism, and if one is not ready, you might be talking about the solution that Buddhist Dharma provides to somebody in a cafe or in a bar, and you might see that, okay, that person suffers, but if that person doesn't have his or her ears open, doesn't do much. Maybe it just registers as a conversation with a weird Buddhist person in a cafe or a bar, So it's a tricky business, because Mahayana Buddhism discusses something called bodhisattvahood. We are bodhisattvas. We are practicing to become Buddhas to benefit all sentient beings. That's being a bodhisattva. But then the reality of it is, the first one of the bodhisattva vows that we recite in our daily practice is, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. And that's the way how it's verbally rendered in our practice. But in our schools and lineages of Buddhism, that might include saying that, I vow to liberate all sentient beings, I don't know how to say it in English, like regardless how long it takes. So endless future lives might be endless past lives if you've been at it for a long time. But if we really look, I vow to liberate all sentient beings. Sentient beings are numberless, endless number of beings. And yet we take that vow. It's not, I do not think that we will ever get to the point when all of samsara is empty. I don't think it will ever happen. But nevertheless, we take that vow because it makes all the difference to ourselves. That's the way, when we take that vow into our heart, that's the vehicle to Buddhahood, which is Mahayana, great vehicle. But when discussing others, people you meet, people you see, one life is just like a tiny spark. Poop. And then one life, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. One spark, and then there's another spark, and another. That's our past lives and future lives. I lost my thought. Yeah, so when we meet people, we'd have to be Mahasiddhas when we see somebody, new people, at any place. We'd have to be Mahasiddhas to be able to see and perceive people's individual karmas and where they are in their practice, where they are in their karmic situation. So, and if and when we can't see that as samsaric beings, and that's a definition, we cannot actually see that as samsaric beings, perhaps to a degree, but not fully. Then if we meet, let's say, our neighbor in the pub downstairs, and we are so enthusiastic about Dharma, this is something that will help you, and she or he doesn't understand it, doesn't hear it, but that's how you explain it. We'd have to see people's individual karmas to really to be perfect in our way of transmitting. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we can be clear-minded, be ourselves. We don't even have to discuss Buddhism in the pub. Just enjoy the drink, have a laugh together. Just be together with others. Because not many people can do that in an authentic fashion. Not many people in cafes or bars or pubs, in places, in meetings, are really meeting others. They are just having their minds full of stuff, and it's the stuff meeting the stuff of others. And that makes all the difference, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
Liz, go ahead.
I just have a question about self-compassion, and specifically about compassion for yourself, like as a child, or an earlier you, a memory that you have of yourself as a child.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that child with compassion and not get sucked into the whole memory that, the swirling around of this happened to me and the selfing part of it? How do you manage to give compassion to that part of yourself without that other, without getting sucked in? Is that clear?
It's the same way you do it with others. Self-compassion means to practice vipassana. Through vipassana, you see into this selflessness. So, do you understand? Do you follow? So, if and when you have some memories from your childhood, or from a bad marriage, or from any other kind of thing, bad memory, it's not that you have to start hugging yourself, or I'm not saying that hugging is bad, but I'm saying that don't fall into fool's compassion. Practice what Buddhism preaches. Practice vipassana. See through selfing in that reaction. Why does it feel, I have this memory from my childhood and it fucking hurts my heart and it's painful, and what do? I experience it fully. I let it come into my heart. Give your whole body to it and just remain aware. And that's how you see through it. That's Vipassana. That is self-compassion according to Buddhist practice. You still have the memory after that when that selfing releases. You still have the memory, but it doesn't have stickiness. Doesn't make you feel awful anymore because the self has been released.
And Kim, would you bring the light of awareness to it in the heart?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. To dance with it?
Yeah. To dance with it. Go ahead, Kedar.
I was it's this topic kind of reminded me of where I was about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and how different things were. And it's always interesting to me because I think yesterday you spoke about shamatha and versus dynamic concentration, and it's funny it's as if there was like a pool of my suffering or a lake or something, and I was with my practice back then, I was taking a spoon and just kind of sort of taking some of that water out, and now and after maybe I believe last year when when the first bhumi opened, it's as if there were clouds above the lake, slowly evaporating the water all at once. And it's interesting to me because I just a few days ago I was thinking about how inauthentic I was when I was talking to other people back then, and now at least when I approach other folks or situations, there's just this level of understanding and loving kindness. Sometimes I like using that term more. That just automatically comes, and I don't have to force it or anything like that. So thank you.
That's brilliant. That's lovely to hear. That's it.
I think many have experienced that forcing right after awakening when trying to share the method. At least I try to pull it over people's head. It doesn't work.
I often say that compassion is not an emotion. It is kind of a feeling, kind of an energy, but it's not emotion in the sense that now I have to generate this compassion, some kind of energy, and from that energy I can then heal people and heal the world and liberate people. If you have to do something like this, then it's not it. So another way of saying what I'm trying to say is that when we have recognition of the natural state, there is clarity, there is softness, there is groundedness to it, these three basic characteristics, and that is bodhicitta itself. That is already filled up to the brim with compassion. So you don't have to add any special energy to that or special emotion that you would then keep generating and try to sustain.
I think the fool's compassion is...
Okay, can you come closer to the mic, please?
Sorry? There's a storm raging outside now. I'm directly under the roof. Heavy metal.
No, it's the Vajra Mudra.
Yeah. I take that any day, yes. Yeah, the fool's compassion is when you still take suffering to be something solid, something real. You want to relieve the other person of it because you take it still to be real to a certain degree. And in the natural state, you actually live the illusoriness of suffering. You live that there actually is no suffering. You live the union of samsara and nirvana, and there's no bigger solution than that to the problem of suffering. As long as you try to relieve it somehow, you still take it to be something solid.
Yeah, exactly. There is someone sent me a question through the chat window. I'll read it to you. Any tips for recognition of the state when physically ill, acutely or chronically? I'd tend to get lost in these loops of tension and fear, and it feels like there is no clarity in the mind for surrender or successful vipassana. Any tips for recognition of the natural state when physically ill, acutely or chronically? Well, if it's like a short illness, I don't know, like a flu or a fever or something like that, I suppose. Migraines, headaches. It's actually the same thing with chronic illness. I had a burnout for 3.5 years, and during that period, my vital energy was really, really low. I had also insomnia for 6 years when I didn't get proper sleep for a long time. And I think that it kind of gave me a taste of what chronic illness feels like, because I had migraines and headaches all the time, and I had to eat painkillers every day for years on row to be able to do my work and support my family. So I think I can use that experience as my experience of chronic illness. Having said that, there are much worse chronic illnesses than that, what I experienced, but nevertheless. So when one is ill, one's vital energy and vitality is on a very different level than it is when one is healthy. So you just don't have as much energy and vitality power as healthy people do. And that gives practice a very different spin. Puts you into a very different perspective in relation to Dharma practice. Nevertheless, it's doable, of course. Actually, I remembered there are these letters between Japanese Zen master and his young female student who was about to pass away because of chronical illness. They are called letters of Yaeko Iwasaki. Yaeko Iwasaki. And in a nutshell, those letters are about, this old Zen masters who's been around for, 80 years, and he's seen everything, And then this young girl, I think Iwasaki was 23 or 24 when she passed away. And this Zen master announced that this young lady was the most enlightened person he ever met. And apparently, one of the catalysts that led into deep realization of Yaeko Iwasaki was her illness. She didn't have the luxury of taking it casually or taking it easy. I'll watch television or, go to movies or do something else for a few hours and then I'll practice for 20 minutes. She didn't have that option. She was about to die. So I think illness in that sense can be a blessing, actually, because it speeds things up. It cuts through your bullshit so effectively, makes things more simple, and you naturally, automatically prioritize. If you have the fortune to have learned Dharma. So that's one. And that very attitude, remembering death, one's mortality, that's a classical Buddhist practice that is meant to, it's one of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. One of the classic exercises that, helps you to prioritize things. And that already, it cuts through your stuff. So where does it cut to? To the natural state, of course. And that's why it's recommended as a preliminary practice. Any tips for recognition of the natural state when physically ill? Well, because vitality is much lower, then one has to, actually the illness forces one to learn to be very sensitive about self-pacing. If you practice too much, it will tire you down. So you kind of have to be sensitive about that. But having said that, keep churning the mantras in your mind, whether guru mantras or deity mantras. So mantras are tantric practice, or if it's shouting pets, shouting has, shouting horse, if that's what you prefer over tantric mantras, do that. And both options, tantric mantras, Chokchen mantras, or the senjins, the short syllables, they will help you with the recognition of the natural state. I tend to get lost in these loops of tension and fear, and it feels like there is no clarity in the mind for surrender or successful vipassana. In that case, you have to cut through more sharply. The blade is dull with this description, so you have to sharpen the blade and put more energy, more will, more attack into your shouts, and that will for sure work. If we think of a dull axe, for example, and you have to chop wood it's awful because you just hit the wood and it doesn't split, right? But when it's sharp, no problem. It will cut through the wood easily. Same thing. Thanks for the question. Go ahead, Liz.
One of my huge motivations for doing Buddhist practice and meditation was to calm down my central nervous system. And it has been very effectively doing that, thank you. But today I was listening to a guy called Gabor Mate. He's a physician who believes in the connectedness of our immune system, our nervous system, and our emotional state, and our brain, and our digestive system, that we're all just one thing, as you would believe in Buddhism. Mm. But so just by doing the practice and calming down our central nervous system, you can help yourself physically too. You help your immune system just by doing the practice. So it's huge motivation to just sit calmly, feeling the light and feeling the natural state. To just even sit in the natural state is helping us physically, even if we don't have the energy to cut through and get directly to, do good vipassana or whatever. Just simply calming our central nervous systems is helping us physically anyway.
Of course. You said that simply sitting in the natural state, like a brief comment to that. As you know, I give a lot of emphasis on the proper versus incorrect recognition of the natural state. That is something to keep in mind, because just to sit in the natural state is actually not that, for an extended period of time, it's not actually that simple in a sense. It's very simple in other sense, but from you can have fogginess and not notice it. You can have dullness and not notice it. So that's one thing. Another thing is that, just like you said, that if we actually have correct recognition, and I might be talking out of my arse right now, but I don't think it's given kind of the way it's expressed in traditional Vajrayana masters from Tibet. It's kind of what I was getting to with in the previous session when I said that when we have correct recognition and we actually recognize ourselves as Buddhas, then we are the source of blessings. We are the source that radiates blessings, pure energy, pure healing, loving, full of light energy. And the way how this is expressed in traditional sources, as far as I know, and I'm not a bookworm, I haven't read much, so I might be a bit wrong here, but the way how I see it is that, it's full with meaning, this natural state. If we say that it's selfless, it's impersonal, it's transparent, it's clear, okay, that's correct in one sense, but from my experience, it's also full of meaning. It's rich with the goodness of life itself. It's like the best time you ever had. It's like a flower garden in full bloom. Beautiful. Well, okay, maybe I won't go there. I don't want to be too poetic. But that maybe it's just sufficient to say that it's full with meaning. It's not meaningless void. That's my point. It's not neutral in the sense that it didn't have meaning or it didn't have flavor. And that's kind of the difference between Vajrayana and then vehicles that, lower vehicles that, you know, have a lot of emphasis on renunciation. With Vajrayana, you have flavors, you have taste. You know, it's like a good beer, good steak, good smoothie. Isn't that what life is? You know, sounds good. Sign me in.
Kim, can I just ask you with the dynamic concentration?
Sure.
Because you're saying that the Vipassana is to invite something in, to be with it, and to make friends with it. But at the same time, you're also recommending sort of cutting through it. So I'm just wondering, is there cutting through? Is there an avoidance going on there? Or?
Well, when we use dynamic concentration, it is to clear the space, is to find and create a space in which you can then practice Vipassana. So if you already have clear mind, if you have already made that space, the reason why I'm doing this gesture all the time is, and speaking of clearing a space, is that what happens in our subtle body is that when you yell that pet or a dozen of them, you actually create the karmic files stored in your subtle body will momentarily go aside, and you only have the you know, our energy channels have two aspects. One is one stores karmas. Part of our nadi is stained, and there's also part, the internal core, that is never stained, that doesn't store karmas. So when we let out the shouts, the outer layer of a nadi that stores karmic files is momentarily, you know, momentarily gone. And this allows you to have that recognition of the natural state. So shouts are used for that purpose. It's kind of a shamatha. This is kind of like a shamatha application, like I was talking. But from there you practice Vipassana. From there, when you have when you have gained confidence in that clarified space, you know, when you have taken it into your body, taken it into your heart, your head, your whole being, from there you start looking back at the mind and practice Vipassana. So the dynamic concentration, the shouts, are not used when you are in the clear mind and then you have some cookie come up. You don't start shouting for the cookie, like get away, pet, pet, pet. You know, that's Hindu practice, not Buddhist practice. But the first thing always is to have that recognition of clarity, softness, groundedness, and from there you practice vipassana. If you are too busy in your mind, then you pet, and it creates the space. Okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I find it particularly useful for stickiness as well. You know, if I'm in a very sort of sticky state of mind, the pets are very useful there. Because that can be very difficult. You know, because you're not sure if you're meditating, you're not sure if it's the natural state. There's not necessarily a lot of thoughts, but at the same time you feel quite stuck, you know?
Right. I think it's good if you're unsure, always shout. Make sure. Let's take 5 minutes at this point and then continue with practice. 5-minute break.